In this video, we're going to be talking about the final project for this class, not with the intent of building out the code for you. That's something that you are going to have to do on your own, but with the intent of, kind of setting you up to succeed and getting you into the right mindset and kind of setting a framework for how you might write your code and how you might troubleshoot the process. So let's just read through the instructions here real carefully first, and then we'll start kind of creating the concept, and then we'll figure out how we're going to do that, and there's many different ways, by the way, and none are necessarily right or wrong. All right, so the title here is Student Club Management Application. It says this application allows you to manage the members of a student club. By selecting different menu options, you can add, delete, edit, and list the students in the club. The program returns to the main menu after each operation until the user selects to exit the application. The main menu should look like this. So I'll tell you what it is. In fact, you could very easily copy paste that into a console write line for sure. But you'll have a little thing that says student club management. You have the option to add, delete, edit, and list the students, and finally exit, and a prompt to select one of the options. All right. The next portions of this here are basically designed to show you what would happen as you hit each one of these menu options, right? So for example, if I chose option number 4, it should print a numbered list of all the students in the club. So we're keeping track of how many, right? So there's a number, and it should look kind of like this. So you'll have a name, they're putting in the pipe symbol, which is the shift of the / key. By the way, usually right above your enter key if you've never typed that in before. It's called a pipe. On some keyboards, it lists as like 2 dashes going vertically, but that's what they call it formally. So the name, a pipe, and the email address. Next number, name, pipe, email address, etc. The add student option will prompt you to enter the first name, prompt you to enter the second name, and then enter their email. Then you move on, you'll get a message on the screen that says student added successfully. The delete option will show you a list of all the students with their number, and then you're going to enter the number to delete, and then that one will be removed from the students that are stored in the system. Finally, we have the ability to not only add, delete, and list, but also to edit the student once they're in the system, right? So that would print a list of all the students, prompt the user, and notice it says similar to list students, so it might, it's a hint, right? Prompt the user to enter the number of the student to edit. That seems like a kind of operation that's already sort of been done. And then allow the user to update the first name, last name, and email of the selected student. So you would get screens like the ones below. Which one are you going to edit? Enter new first name, enter new last name, enter new email, and then once again, a message that it worked. There are some minimum requirements for this. So it says, there must be a program class that contains a main method, right? So you're going to have to be working in the same mode that we've been working in, where we're inside the namespace and have a main method so we can execute the code. The program class should have a main method to drive the program, a collection of some sort to hold the student object. So in other words, an array or a list. And it is telling you here that the students will be created as objects, right? Which means you'll have a class called student, and you will instantiate individual students. You'll have a menu system for the user to navigate through the application. Now, think back to how we've done our programs in the past, if you have an application that keeps running, it's probably going to be inside of a loop with that menu popping up, the selection being received, and then we're going to call methods and stay in that loop until the person types that 5 to exit out and terminate the program. And we've done stuff like that, so you can borrow from your old code. That's really the smart way to do it, right? We're also going to need methods for the following features. Well, basically add, remove, edit, right? So to add a student, remove a student, and notice it says add a student object to the list. So the list that you create will hold student objects. So you have to add a student object, remove a student object, edit the existing student object, and then print all the students in the list to the console, right? So those are the methods you have to create. It's being very specific. And you know what? You could call them add, remove, edit, and print. That might make sense, just as a hint. A student class that stores the student's first name, last name, and email address. The student class should also have this. It should have one or more constructors, right? It's going to be kind of up to you to figure that one out. And then getters or setters or properties for the first name, last name, and email address. So you can do it on kind of a simplistic level, really. You could basically just create private data fields for those that can get set. But if they're going to be allowed to change, should that be public or private? Well, you can figure that out, right? If you do set them to private, remember that you can write methods to change them that are public, right? So there's a couple different ways, or you can set them to public right from the get-go, and then you can just directly change them. Either way, that's up to you. You also will have to have an overridden toString method to print out the student's full name and email that kind of looks like what's on the screen there, right? All right, so this is due in a week, right? And this is, a bit of work, so the first thing I'm going to say right off the bat is if you think there's parts of this that you can create now already, it's not a bad idea to get started, right? And to create little bits and pieces. What I would really strongly suggest before you get started is that you maybe think about how you're going to, parse out your time. The last thing I would want to see you do is like try to create all this like, Wednesday night or something, or all day Thursday, and just like do like a marathon session to create it. Not a really smart approach, right? Not that it couldn't be done, right? But my thinking for an application like this is at least 2, 3, 4 hours of work, so please, think about how you might allot that. If you work better, getting into like hyper-focus mode, shutting out the world and taking the whole day to do it, and I'll be real frank, that's one of my work modes, especially when I did freelance web work. Sometimes I'd take on a project that was a side hustle, and sometimes I'd just stay up all night and crank out a website all night long, right? And then I would earn like a month's pay in a day, that kind of thing. Not really a smart approach, because then the next couple of days I was pretty useless, you know what I mean? So don't do that to yourself. Think, maybe a smart way to proceed is you got 7 days to do it. You could do a little bit tomorrow, a little bit on Sunday, a little bit on Wednesday, that kind of thing. Put your mind at ease on the module 7 stuff, because we're going to code that in class probably. So, all right, so that's the instructions. Now comes the discussion. How do we begin? All right, so here's how I would proceed with this is I would start by diagramming, real frankly. And you can do this in a number of different ways. And I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of use, try to be a little bit clever here. And I'm trying to think of like how to do this without getting really goofy with all the different Zoom tools that we have. And I know they have a whiteboard built in, but I'm not a really huge fan of using it, real frankly. I think what I'm going to do for right now is something extra goofy. and I'm gonna like create a blank file in a different program. Namely, I'm going to use Notepad++. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this tool or not. It's kind of like Visual Studio Code, but it just kind of gives me a canvas to work on. And more importantly, I'm going to kind of do this with drawing on the screen as best I can with the mouse. And then I also have this text editor here where I can maybe pseudocode it a little bit. But I want to kind of get you in the process of thinking about this and how it might operate. So let's start with the basics. When you start the program, what's going to happen? What should be the first thing that happens? Well, I think it's pretty easy to think about, right? Let's get the menu up on the screen, right? All right, so here I go. This is my pseudocoding technique. Display the menu, right? And I'm just going to think here very sequentially at first. Okay, that's the first thing that's going to happen, is we're going to display the menu. I'm not putting the specifics here of what the menu looks like. That's in the instructions. All right, so we're going to display the menu, and then we're going to capture the user's choice. So they're prompted, enter 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So we're going to capture the user choice, and then we are going to run, and maybe this should be one command, capture the user's choice and run the code that goes with. Run the code for that, whatever, however you want to say it, right? I think you got to get the point. Right? So we capture it. And you know what? Actually, maybe there's an intermediate step to here that we didn't think about. Here's the intermediate step. Check to see if the user's choice is valid. They enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. There'll be somebody that does that, or they're meaning to hit 4 and they hit the letter R because it's right next to it, right? So let's accommodate for that, right? We learned how to do this stuff, right? Sounds kind of like either a while loop or a do while loop. So you can check if the entry is not 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and you can write an if statement that kind of does that. Then give them a message and give them a chance to do it again. So you would say, if not valid, ask to re-enter. Okay, makes sense. All right. Okay, so then once the choice is valid, then right, and so you see I'm using the keywords here, and so we should say, so not once, but if the choice is valid, then run the code for that selection, is probably the right way to do it. All right, this is kind of the architecture of the main menu, right? So the program runs, the menu displays, capture the user's choice, we check to see if it's valid. If it's not valid, we ask them to re-enter, and if the choice is valid, then we run the code that goes for it, that works with that. All right, so if you wanted, you could kind of label this and you could say main program. I guess you could just call it main program, that's fine. And what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of labeling and organizing, right? So program starts and it does these steps. All right. Next thing is now they're going to make a choice, right? And we were given 5 choices, right? One thing in the main program body that we didn't put in here is, okay, if it's not valid, ask to re-enter. If the choice is valid, then run the code for that selection. And really, if they choose to exit, stop the program. We didn't put that in. And you know what? This process of capturing all this stuff and doing this, right? I want you to think about this. That's probably a loop, right? And so you might want to put, some sort of annotation here, like loop this, loop this code. Just as a kind of a reminder. But see, and I hope you guys are feeling how I'm doing this. I'm not diving right into writing code. It just makes no sense to do it that way because it's too complex. This is more complex than anything we've written so far. And this roadmap will help tremendously so that we don't forget any of the steps in the process of doing it. The other thing that can help too is we can take this pseudocode and we can also flowchart it, like so you can see kind of how the system will flow. If that's how your brain works, you could go to a flowchart first, and really frankly, a really good tool for that, as silly as it sounds, is like a whiteboard with a marker, right? Where you can like write stuff and erase it and move it around and redraw it, whatever helps. And kind of a really interesting thing that I discovered is, and this is not related to like what we do directly, but like Google has like the people that they hire. And I had gone to like this conference thing once where we got to visit some of their facilities and meet with some of their people. And they literally have these people, and it was mostly the user interface people, by the way, who design you user interfaces. And these people walk around the facility with these little mini whiteboards and markers. And they walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm just designing a new login screen. What do you think? Do you think we should have the login button here or over here? Should it be green? Okay, how about that? Is that better? And very seriously, these people get paid big money to do this. And they're just walking around the facility asking people for opinions on the user interface rather than build it, spend all this time coding it, and then having people go, I hate it. Makes no sense, right? They're doing kind of the same. That's like their approach for doing it. All right, but we're doing the same thing. So we got the menu, we display the menu, capture the user's choice, check to see if it's valid. If not, ask them to re-enter. And do we redisplay the menu at that point? That's kind of a separate thought. Perhaps we do. I don't know. Then run the code for that selection. If you choose to exit. And I'm going to say here, or redisplay the menu, right? Once you're all done, right? So whatever. Okay. Let's move on to the next part. Now, I think what would make a lot of sense to me is that we look at all of the individual things that we have to do to put people in here. We have some stuff we have to create first, though. So we need, and I'm going to just put here, okay, and maybe this is better here at the top. Right, so now I'm thinking about the stuff that we have to kind of pre-create in order to make this happen. We were told, so we need to create a student class, right? And we were told here what to put in it, right? We were told here somewhere. So we're going to need a list of student objects, but we need the student class to begin with. The student class should have one or more constructors, getters or setters, and really, I mean, I'm just going to be kind of weird about this, but you could copy paste this into your pseudocode if that helps, right? And I'm just going to indent that. So one or more constructors, getters or setters for first name, last name, and email address, and an overridden two-string method to print that stuff out. So here we have, because the class, whether it's a separate file or you include it in the same file as the main program, you still need to create this. And if you don't have this, you can't run the program. So you see why I'm putting it up at the top? We're going to create our class first, right? Because otherwise, how can you ever instantiate it? The other thing is we need to create a list or array of student objects, right? Now that's kind of a simple declaration. But we would want this stuff pre-created before the program runs or before the menu displays, right? We need the class file, we need the list. All right. Let's go back to the instructions here. Main method, a collection to hold student option. Okay, we did that. A menu system to navigate through the application. We kind of already handled that. And then we need methods for each of the features, right? And we say methods here, but they could be functions, or should they be methods? Now, the instructions very clearly say methods. So let's have a discussion about this. I could write functions in the main program that handle these tasks. Okay, so in other words, if you're thinking of this as like stuff we're pre-creating, like the class would kind of sit separately. The list or the array, maybe that's really part of the main program, right? So we would need to create a list or array of student objects. The class sits separately. This says very clearly methods for the following features. How is a method different from a function again? You guys remember that? A function is something we would add to the main program that runs a block of code that has a name on it. A method is a function that's built into an instance of a class or the class definition. So to me, it says that those methods should be added to the student objects. Do you guys read that the same way? That's what it says to me. All right, but what does it say up here? Okay, list the students, add a student, delete a student, edit a student. Okay, all right. I think all right. So let's go with the method approach. So really, I'm going to just copy this because it's so nicely and concisely stated. That way, I can just drop it in here, and I'm going to say methods for the following features. Right? Add a student to the list object, remove it, edit an existing student, and print all the students in the list to the console. All right. Okay, so interestingly, is this print to the console different than this toString method? And I think so, because this prints one student. This prints all the students. See the difference? Now, the print function, or excuse me, method could contain a loop, right? So we haven't done coding this intent. So like really what I'm suggesting here is normally when we've created a class and we've put methods inside of it, they've been pretty simple, right? But nothing says that I can't write loops in here, that I can't manipulate objects or any of that. All of that code still applies. You can put it inside your class function too. That's absolutely valid, right? So that's kind of where you have to take it. Oops. All right. So if we're going to write each one of these, so here's kind of where you start breaking down your thinking here. What's the process for adding a student to the object list? And so I would kind of do this. I would like start indenting and saying, okay, I would prompt for the name. And really these are separate steps. So, prompt for the email. how about the fact that we're numbering the list, right? So we also have to generate, generate a number for listing the student. Or do we really need to do that? If they're going into a list or an array, could we take the index value, add 1 to it, and then that's numbering? Yeah, I think that makes sense. Generate a number for listing students by adding 1 to the list/array index, right? So you would extract it and add 1 to it, right? There's different ways to do this. There's an alternate way to do it. The alternate way to do it would be when you go to list them on the screen, you could just very simply put that inside of a loop to display the list of students and just generate the number dynamically with the loop, right? So I'm going to say, or do it with a loop. I'm going to say, probably easier. So I'm giving you guys, see all the hints I'm giving you guys here, right? So that's the one. And let's move on to the next one. And I'm looking at the time now and I'm realizing, hey, we're running out of time. But if you were to remove a student, you still have to, you have to display a list of the students with numbers. And maybe the better way to say it would be display a numbered list of students. Prompt the user to select student. Make sure the selection is valid, right? If valid, remove the student from the list. And then display a completion message, if I remember right. So I got my logics all worked out here. If I wanted to edit a student in the object list, once again, I would display a numbered list of students, prompt the user to select the student, make sure the selection is valid. You see how like there's like repeats in the logic here that kind of help you write your code so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, right? Make sure the selection is valid, and if valid, prompt the user to alter each property. And if you want, you prompt the user to alter name. And once again, you could indent here. Prompt the user to alter name. Prompt the user to alter email. Was it first name, last name, whatever. I think it is a first name, last name thing. That's how I set it up. So, but if valid, prompt the user alter name. And I'll let you guys extrapolate the first name, last name thing. And then once you're done, display a completion message. And then at that point, do you go back to the main menu? My thinking is that anytime you complete one of these steps, you're back to the main menu. Why? Because that's what you're supposed to do. And so after you add a student, go back to main menu. Now that might not actually be code that you're writing. directly. You wouldn't put that inside the method. Just so you have like the program flow sort of created. So if you want to print all the students to the console, well, that's pretty easy, right? That one's, this, right? And then go back to the main menu. So this stuff, and this is kind of weird, right? So these are methods that would be inside the class that travel with the object, if you read it as it is. So just to kind of review all the stuff that we put up here. So like if people are like watching the video, only if you want to screenshot it all at once, here's your first screenshot, right? Covers, well, let me zoom out just a tad. So this is the top part. This is to create the student class. And then in the main program, we would create a list or array of student objects and then display the menu. And then capture the user's choice, check to see if it's valid. If not, ask to re-enter. If the choice is valid, run the code for that selection, however that happens. And so if you're adding students, you assume it would trigger this method if you're removing, etc. And then, this is what will take you back to the main menu when it completes, right? And then once they choose to exit or redisplay the menu, they don't choose to exit, so we can keep the program running. So for as weird as it is, I mean, here's the whole roadmap, is there anything I'm missing? Not really. Now, of course, the devil is in the details. Some of this stuff is very generalized, but if you think back to all the things that we've done in the class, okay, well, displaying a menu, that might be one of the easiest things to write. So you could write a function. So I'm just going to kind of put it here, a function to display the main menu. So I would create it as a function, and then every time I want to put it up on screen, I just say display menu, right? And then capturing the user's choice, checking to see if it's valid, asking, all of this loop. So if you want, and that could be a function too. Right, so you could have a function that says, user choice or menu choice or something like that. And okay, so here's the next question you might ask. Does it have to be a function? Well, the bottom line is I will expect to see a student object. I will expect to see a collection, array, or list or whatever of student objects. And then the student object has to contain all this stuff, right? Which we know how to do pretty much. And then, if you choose to not write these as functions, that would be inefficient, but you could. There's nothing that says that you couldn't, and the program would still work, and I would count that. But my whole goal here is to give you the roadmap so you can build it and not have to struggle with the conception of it. Now you have a roadmap. So the other thing that might help you a lot is, especially if you're thinking about how all the pieces connect, it's okay, for example, to create a flow chart, that visually diagrams this if it helps your brain to understand it better, right? Last thing you want to do, and notice it's not the first thing I did, is go right to writing the code. If I was to write this code first, I'm a big fan of low-hanging fruit, so I'd create the menu first, get that to run, right? Set up a loop that allows you to get the user choice and have it work, Then create your class. First, start simple, create the data fields, create the constructors, create the toString methods, and then start adding the methods one at a time for doing this stuff. Now, for some of you, and I'm just going to put this little thing here, if this is daunting to create as methods inside the class, I mean, you could create these as program functions instead, and it would work. So in other words, these could be functions inside the main program body that interact with the objects. That would work too. The intent, and I think better, would be to have it be methods inside the object. Now, if you look, just to wrap this up and then we'll go, here's how we're scoring, by the way. And you know what, I don't know that I'm going to use the rubric to score. I think I'm probably going to go judgment call, but this is the things we're looking for. So we're looking for the student class. We're looking for the constructors or constructor. The student class should data hide, so it uses properties or private fields with getters and setters. We should have a toString method in there. We should have a main program class with a main method. We should have some sort of a collection, an array or a list of student objects. We should have some sort of main menu logic. That's the main program body that I was talking about. We have to add a student, remove a student, edit a student, and list a student, right? And then what happens, well, it should compile too and run, ideally. The program should actually work. That would be helpful. So that's the roadmap for the application, folks. I'm gonna stop the recording here.